Unleashed.
All right, 888-933-93. It has been a heck of a year for the global warming alarmists. This was the year when we went from, we got to really take care of the Earth, or, the temperature's going to rise by 20 degrees by 2100, or I don't know what the deal was, but it was 2100. We were looking out for 2100, where I guess humanity was going to be incinerated by then. Well, now we had 12 years. Then they actually bumped that down to 10 years. And now some people are saying 9 years.
Oh, I think we're up to about 5 minutes left for humanity. 5 minutes.
It's unbelievable. So we wanted to talk to Gregory Wrightstone, who has, the book, The Inconvenient Facts, which is great, and did the app as well.
Yes.
And I think the app's available, right? No?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was, and then it wasn't, and now it is.
Look for Inconvenient Facts.
So Gregory joins us now on The Blaze. Gregory, welcome.
Oh, yeah. We better talk quick, because I think we're down to 12 minutes we have left. So Can we get it in that time?
We'll try.
Crazy.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do. Since last we talked, we've had the Greta Thunberg tour, where she's been shaming us all over the planet. And, I don't know. Is anybody listening to her hysteria? Is she making a big difference, you think, in this argument?
Well, she's certainly exciting young people with her so-called facts that just aren't true.
Yeah.
And she really needs to go back to school.
Yes, she does.
It's not that so much of what she knows, it's that so much of what she thinks she knows is just incorrect. And then there's a lot of the climate facts that she doesn't have any knowledge of. And I've gone to some of these Friday climate strikes. I call them Fridays for Fascists. And I've talked to some of the adults. I get where the 16 and 15 or 12-year-old little girls, they're easily excitable, and they buy into this climate alarmism, but it's the adults that I talk to at these things that it's amazing just how little knowledge they have about the actual climate facts. And there's so much misinformation out there. You have to wade through it. And that's, as you know, we've talked before. I had the same experience several years ago. You were told one thing, then you hear just the opposite. And it was that search for the truth that led me to the research that said, oh my God, I've got to write this book and expose all this stuff.
And the indoctrination of Greta Thunberg, and that entire generation, in fact, is just despicable. I mean, somebody should be held accountable for that, because they have done such an unbelievable disservice to these kids. They've scared the hell out of them, and they've created all this climate of fear among the youth that has gotten out of control, where they actually think the world is going to end in 8 or 10 years. It's despicable. Yeah,
exactly. And they're lying to us, and they're lying to them. And part of my job, as I see it, is to expose these lies. And the biggest one lately, and Greta Thunberg's been promoting this notion of the sixth mass extinction. She talks just about every time we hear her speak. We hear her talking about extinctions raging out of control, and it's just the opposite. If we look at extinctions, the UN report that was released last month predicted 1 million extinctions over the next several decades. Well, to get that, you need 20 or 30,000 extinctions per year. You know what it's been for the last 40 years? How many extinctions? Two extinctions per year, not 2,000, not 200. Two. Well, we're going to get to 30,000 pretty soon. No, we're not.
Wow.
No, we're not.
And
the story should have been that the UN should have been saying, oh my God, we're doing a really good job protecting endangered species. That should have been the story.
Wait, Gregory, I just saw a story last week and this year alone, 2019, they've discovered 71 new species.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're plus 69 now. I mean, we're doing fine. Oh my God.
Yeah, there was just an article came out 2 days ago. They said, In the last decade, there have been, I think it was 180 species gone extinct. Well, if you go and look at each one of those species extinctions, virtually every one of them, well, the species was last seen in 1887 on Galapagos Island. This species last was seen in 1927. They just declared them extinct within the last 10 years. And so, I mean, you have to go through and dive in and parse this information, and I've exposed these lies. And why do they do it? They do it because they need to generate a climate of fear among
hysteria.
Among everybody. They have to have a scared population.
Right.
Because why in the world, Pat, why would the United States impose economically crippling regulations and restrictions on our freedom like the Paris Climate Accords or the Green New Deal? The only reason we would do it is if we don't, we're going to dive into one climate apocalypse event after the other. And as you know, we've talked, I'm a huge proponent of an Earth that's thriving and prospering, and humanity's benefiting from the modest warming in temperature and an increase in CO2, and it just is.
Yeah. Although they're trying desperately right now. We're speaking with Gregory Wrightstone, wrote the book Inconvenient Facts, and created the Inconvenient Facts app for those times when you're talking to somebody who's annoying you at work with the climate change nonsense. But you have a great fact about the U.S. having reduced CO2 emissions over the past decade. What has China done as far as CO2 goes?
Yeah, that's what I've been dealing a lot. I'm in the middle of writing commentary about that. That's the big story. That we're being told we have to reduce our CO2 carbon dioxide emissions. They're saying that burning of fossil fuels is creating too much carbon dioxide, which is warming the planet. And what we see here, the new EPA commissioner that Trump appointed just last month came out. He said, we've reduced our CO2 emissions by 14% in the last 10 years.
Wow.
But, and this is the comma, but, it's the but, what's after but that's really important, is that China, according to him, in the last 30 to 45 days, their increases in CO2, just in that time period of a month and a half, completely wiped out everything we've done in the last 10 years to reduce our emissions.
Jeez.
China's charging forward.
Jeez.
But, you know, the premier in China and Donald Trump, they're actually moving in lockstep because they both understand how do you drive, how's an economy driven? How do we get a turbocharged economy? You do it by providing low-cost, abundant, reliable energy. Mm-hmm. And in China, they've got a control and command economy. They're charging forward with opening new coal mines, building more coal-fired electricity. Here in the United States, Donald Trump is protecting us by saying, no, I'm not going to harm our economy by artificially increasing energy costs to everybody, because that drives up costs for everything, and it'd be putting the brakes on our economy. He doesn't want to do that.
And yet, the climate alarmists, though, are making China out to be on the cutting edge of environmentalism. How do they get away with that? And why are they pushing that rhetoric?
Well, look what's being proposed to save the planet. It's wind and solar.
Yeah.
No one looks at the front end or the back end of this. The front end is where all the rare earth minerals come from. It's China, Mongolia. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you what. Everybody listening right now should Google. Well, don't get away from the radio or the TV, but Google Congo and cobalt. Those two words, and you'll find there are over 10,000 children under the age of 12 that are being used in these open pit cobalt mines in the Congo to create batteries for the Tesla and your precious iPhones. And then we look at that's the front end of the creation of this. What about the tail end?
Wow.
These things the solar panels and wind turbines only have a 20-year life, and then they have to be recycled or buried, and you can't recycle solar panels, and the big wind turbines just fill up landfills tremendously. So it's those two things we look at, and then I like to look at India as a great example. India is they're also charging forward with coal-fired electricity, but Prime Minister Modi there, he says we're going to do it. We have to, because he's got 600 million people living in destitute generational poverty that he wants to lift up out of poverty.
Yeah.
And how can you argue against that? But that's what Greta wants. She wants to destine these people to generational poverty.
Yes. India, Africa, all the developed world, sorry, you can't have access to cheap energy. Sorry, you're just going to have to starve. It's insane. It's insane.
It is. And you can't do, India, for example, I was there, the last time I was there was during the monsoon. You can't do solar. They've got 3 years, they have 3 months a year where it does nothing but rain. You can't use solar. And a lot of that time, the wind projects, so they can't do wind, they can't do solar really, and you're left with coal-fired. And that's what they're doing. And also we look, there are probably 4 million people dying early deaths around the globe, but mostly these really horrifically poor countries because they're cooking over wood and dry dung, and they're breathing in the fumes. And it's those are 4 million lives that could be easily spared by providing fossil fuels, propane, compressed natural gas, coal-fired electricity. Those 4 million lives could be spared an early demise, and that's what I want.
Are you saying that we shouldn't go to a dry dung energy system in this country? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
I mean, that's a little radical. I think we've all been counting on dry dung as the future. All right.
I hear
all
you.
right. If you're going to surprise us with that announcement all of a sudden. All right. The book. What's next for you? What's coming up?
Well, I'm struggling writing my next book. It'll be, I'm not going to tell you the title, but it's going to be, again, it's going to be a celebration. There are two things that I've identified in this debate that really need to be debunked. One is that our current modern historical warming period, and when the temperatures we have right now, are warmer than they've been in 2,000 years. No, they're not. And I'm going to be using historical data and scientific data to dispute that. I mean, we still got Vikings buried deeply in the permafrost. For crying out loud, the Romans were growing citrus in the north of England. Things like that.
Yeah.
And people understand that. They get that. And then the other half of the book will be a celebration of an Earth that's thriving and prospering. And it's, just by almost every metric we look at, is an Earth that's improving. And part of this is, if we look historically, I find it fascinating to look back through human history over the last 4,000 or 5,000 years to find that the past warming periods were times of thriving and prospering, and it's the cold that were horrific. If you were Emperor Pat in a warming period, well, you had it pretty good. You could feed your subjects. I think you'd be a good emperor, by the way. But if you were Emperor Pat in a cold period, man, they'd be coming at you with a pitchfork.
Yes, exactly.
And do we have just a couple minutes? There's a fascinating relationship here between the witch hunts of the late Middle Ages and climate change. And because starting in about the 14th century, it started getting cold, and crops began to fail. Famine set in, and they blamed it on weather causing witches. And they started killing them. And over the next 300 years, there were like 30,000 to 40,000 supposed witches burned at the stake for the most part. And then at about 1500, it started warming up. And
that's because they got rid of all the witches.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
That's what they said. Oh, we did really good. And that lasted for like 40 years, and then it really started getting cold. And that's really when the big pogroms set in with huge numbers of witches. And it's just tied directly to temperature. And it's exactly opposite of what we're being told. We're being told, beware of the warm. No. If you're a Game of Thrones fan, you know what's the House Stark motto is winter is coming. Well, they feared winter, and we should too. It's the next time it's going to get cold, and it will be horrific. It will be horrific. Not as bad as the previous periods, because back then, we're not moving food from place to place on ox cart.
Right.
But that's what Greta would want us to do. She wants us to get away, either electric-powered ox carts. We can transport, but it will still, our technology, when crops fail, it's not going to help. We can't build hundreds of thousands of acres of greenhouses to make crops work. But it's going to be bad.
Fascinating as always, Gregory. Thank you.
Yeah.
Gregory Wrightstone, Inconvenient Facts is the book.
We actually have a link for that book on Twitter at Pat Unleashed, and we're also going to link to that awesome blog post that you're talking about with the witchcraft being associated with weather.
Awesome.
Oh, thank you so
That
much.
is awesome.
Yeah, the book's been #1 bestseller on Amazon off and on since March. Just the other day it was again.
That's great. All right. Thanks, Gregory. We'll talk to you again soon. Appreciate it.
Yeah, get that as a Christmas gift for your climate change hysteria.
The alarmist in your
yeah.
life. Yeah. 888-933-93. Keeps. Let's talk about